All right, guys, what's going on? Thanks so much for joining us on another episode of the Retic Lounge. We are super excited for today's interview. We are finally getting Vivtech, Erica, and Ryan on with us. We have some exciting news for you guys, and just an awesome in-depth discussion on lighting for your reptiles. I'm at some point going to need to let my cat out of here because she's about to knock over my light. I just realized she was in here. Anyways, thanks so much for subscribing and just being a part of us. Don't forget to check us out on YouTube, like, subscribe, and comment, as well as follow us on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And don't forget, become a Patreon member if you guys are wanting access to me and Nathan and the rest of our huge Discord community that we have. We are putting up new content weekly, in addition to what we're putting out on YouTube every Friday. Nathan, what else you got?
Just last but not least, just make sure you're a member of USARC, especially if you're in this reptile community. Support them. Member numbers mean more than ever, and that's what our legislators are looking at. So,
yeah, before we get started, let's go ahead and just hear a little word from our sponsorships, and then we'll be in for the interview. Whether you're just getting into retics or you've been breeding for years, the first place you want to visit is Stewart Design. More and more breeders keep showing up at shows, on Morph Market, and all over socials. Sometimes it may feel impossible to get anyone's attention. Stewart Design helps small businesses like yours do big things through brand clarity, helping entrepreneurs to start and scale businesses that are easy to know and love. Their work can help any company or industry, but they've done a ton of work for ours. Stewart Design created the brand for US Arcs, Canova, Reach Out Reptiles, Coiled, and dozens of other well-known reptile breeders. Like many of us, the owner of Stewart Design, Blake, is a keeper and breeder who fell in love with Retics. Although Stewart Design does a lot of corporate work, Blake has a passion for working with people in the reptile industry. So, wondering if Stewart Design is right for you? Stewart Design can help if you're just getting started or you're ready to take things to the next level. Maybe you're struggling to stand out and build your presence online or at shows. And maybe you don't want to be like the other guys or get lost in the crowd. You want to make your own way doing what you love. You might just have a big idea and know your business is special, but you need help sharing it with the reptile community. If something here resonates with you, reach out to Blake. Have a conversation with him. To learn more or get started, visit sdidentity.com or call them at 855-SD-LOGOS. Clear brand, own markets, Stewart Design helps create them.
Lucas, you're muted.
I was muted. Man, I already started.
This
I'm
is
the new
two
Nathan now.
episodes in a row for
I'm the new
2023.
Nathan now. By the way, that whole ad segment, I know Nathan couldn't hear it, and so I'm just gonna like post edit that in there. But anyways, Erica, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. Can you guys hear us?
Yes.
All
How's it
right.
going, guys?
Awesome, man. We're super excited to have you guys on.
Well, thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, how was your
Excited enough, I put down my book.
how was your guys' New Year's?
It was good. We just kind of hung out at the house with the kids, kind of had a chill New Year's, and then New Year's Day went over to Erica's parents, and her sister and brother-in-law and nephews were there, and we all just kind of hung out and had dinner, and good, easy day.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like ever since I moved here to Texas, I've laid low on New Year's, and it makes me feel way older than I am.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We cracked open the apple cider for them.
Oh yeah.
The sparkling apple cider for them, and
Yeah, I got to
we're
tell
like, yeah.
told them all when I was like 15, like 14, 13. I was a kid. We'd go to Walgreens and get
How
those.
does this number
'Cause they
keep
get-
getting
I don't
lower
know.
every time you
'Cause
tell
they-
a story?
Because they put them in the paper bag, and then me and my buddies would go down to the
6 years
park and
old.
drink them out of the bag and feel all awesome.
And then a cop stops you, and then
We were drinking non-alcoholic apple cider and felt like total wimps.
I was a total
Right.
hockey nerd growing up, so I used to like to get them when I was a kid and spray them.
Nice.
We're not going to let the kids watch this podcast now. 'Cause we don't know what else to say.
oh man. So if you guys don't mind, I just want to give you guys the floor. Erica, Ryan, go ahead and introduce yourselves, introduce Vivtech Products, give us kind of an inside scoop of what you guys do, and then we'll dig into asking some questions.
I always do it. You do it. All right, apparently not. All right, so I'm Ryan McVeigh, and this is my amazing wife, Erica. Vivtech Products, man. So Vivtech started as just a need, out of a need. I realized being in the reptile industry for a long time that there was a big difference in how other hobbies kept animals and like the different stages of equipment and things that went along with it. And with reptile, it was kind of all the same thing. The same bulb you use for a leopard gecko you could have on a $5,000 lace monitor. There was no differentiation, and there was a lot of opportunity for some really unique technology to come step up and improve husbandry. So that was that opportunity, and we kind of decided to jump at it. And that was after I left working as the marketing brand manager for Zilla for 6 years, and I ran that brand, and it was a lot of fun. I learned a ton. But I just saw a bigger, I saw a bigger opportunity, and we decided to kind of jump at it. So I guess that's.
Usually this is a lot like smoother. So
Yeah, it's been a couple.
yeah, he's
weeks.
a little rusty on giving the whole story apparently. So it wasn't as smooth as it normally.
Well, Erica, let's hear. There's always two sides to the story. So, Erica, give us your pitch.
So Vivtech actually did come out of a need, but also a want in the reptile and exotic pet industry. So one of the big things we wanted to do is bring the new technology from, what's actually happening in, the 2000s rather than the bulb that Edison created into the reptile world, but also into the avian market and into the exotic mammal market as well as corals. So we wanted to find a way that was safe, that was affordable, and actually had longevity longer than 6 months, so that we're not just consuming all of these bulbs and then putting them into landfills, because that's actually harmful for the environment with all the phosphorus, mercury, and things like that. So that was a big one for us. And then also on top of it, we wanted to be able to allow keepers that were in like that advanced stage to like, I'm an expert and a god. We wanted those people to also have different types of equipment that they could actually utilize. Like our bulbs now, Retics can beat them up. They're not going to die. Our smart cameras.
The bulb, not the Retic.
Yeah, well, no, they won't.
The Retic will beat itself up.
Yeah, but like our smart tech monitor or smart tech cameras, we wanted those to be durable, but we want them to be high quality, high definition, so that you can actually see your rare animals like our crocodile tegus doing courtship behaviors. Those are things you're not going to be able to see, and if you get something that's easily hacked by somebody else, then you got something that's grainy, and then you might have somebody else looking at your stuff, or you walk in your reptile room in your underwear.
Which is
Right.
usually how I walk into the reptile room.
Same.
See, my pitch
90%
had
of the
underwear.
time.
That's why people will remember it.
I mean, I for one am thankful for what you guys are doing, and I mean, just from like a small sample size, what I'm really excited for about the LED lights that you guys are producing is that they emit like minimal heat, and for someone like me who keeps my room ambient temperature, any light that I put in my enclosure is going to drastically increase the ambient inside that enclosure, and that ruins everything when it comes to retics, when it comes to breeding, when it comes to them pushing their faces in, and a bunch of different aspects. And so LED lighting, I really do think, I mean, LED lighting is the future of lighting, and now that you guys are bringing it into the reptile industry and trying to enhance it and make it as good as possible, for me, it's just like lights out. The camera is awesome as well. I want to get my hands on one. I want to put them inside my tubs, in my egg tubs. I want to be able to actually, like, I think it would be awesome to watch like a pure Calatoa or like different pure locality, and just have that footage to be able to share with the world, because not a lot of people have seen, pure localities like in the moment, pipping, coming out of the egg, doing all that.
In fairness, most people haven't actually seen eggs pipping before. Or for like lizard keepers, I know this is a retic one, but for like lizard keepers, they don't get to see like the little subtle movements of the shakes of the eggs right before they hatch, and then one comes out, and then they all start coming out. Like, they don't get to see that. They get to see the end result where it's, half of them are out or the noses are already out.
Yeah. Well, and
Right.
the camera, for me, it was, like she said, the courtship behavior, that was one of the coolest things. That happened a couple weeks ago.
I don't even know what a croc tegu is. What?
There's
And
only,
that,
Angry.
there's only like 8 of them in the U.S.
That's
We have a
pretty
pair.
insane.
There's a couple other pairs out there. They're an unbelievably weird lizard. They're a little tiny tegu.
They kind of look like a plated lizard almost in body style.
They kind of, yeah, amoeba-ish, which are teids, so I mean it makes sense. But yeah, they're mean as hell. They bite the crap out of you. They drop their tail the second you look at them wrong. They're super secretive and never come out.
But they still tail whip you.
Yeah.
You don't know it'll come off.
But no, they're awesome animals, but they're very shy. So for the first year we had them, we never saw them out.
No, we thought they were dead.
Actually, the first 3 times we saw them out basking was through the camera. Because if we were in the room, they didn't come out. And a couple weeks ago, I was going through our camera footage, just checking. I like to see anytime there's movement. Whether are they eating? Where are they going? What are they doing? Where does she spend most of her
because
time?
they tried that new diet that we made, so we wanted to see if they were eating.
See if they're eating this new diet. And we looked, and I was going through the footage, and I actually caught our.
What did you do?
I didn't do anything. It's Lucas and Nathan's fault, guys, not us.
I'll be the scapegoat. with my 2-year-old daughter, I need
No, but they're gonna meet
scapegoats.
the next Nathan and then just be like, you.
Yeah, we gotta be careful. If you come up for Tinley or something, come to the house. You walk in, and you'll get
Your
raped
name
like
is not
knife
Lucas
eyes.
or Nathan. Just make up a new name.
Hi, I'm Zimbabwe.
There you go.
So we were talking about the cool, really rare aspects of croc tegus.
Crocodile tegus.
Yeah.
Crocodile tegus. Nathan's trying to get a picture of them on the
Yep.
screen.
No, I'm getting it right now.
Perfect.
So go ahead.
Because
Yeah,
I've
they're-
never seen one, and that's pretty awesome.
So most people haven't, and they're super secretive. So every single time we went into the enclosure, I'd have to like pull everything out and dig them out to find them and check on them. And the second you get a hold of them, they start tail whipping and trying to bite and rip your fingers off, and they just want to run away and drop their tail. So it's a huge negative to try and get in there and touch them at all. So the camera was a huge help in being able to see how they were utilizing their cage, where they were hiding and spending their time, their behaviors and things like that. And then we got to catch, and I have video, and I can share this with you guys later. I'll just send it to you. But I actually caught them doing some mating behaviors and courtship behaviors. And the female lifted up her legs and actually accepted the male's courtship behaviors. And then the camera went out, and so I don't know if they like moved off screen just enough where it stopped moving and it turned off. But yeah, so we're hoping for some croc tegu eggs this year.
Is that because
cool.
your app for the is there like an explicit content that you have to check off on the app in order to see the rest of it go off?
Maybe I didn't. It was a paywall. Like I only got to see that much.
Yeah, didn't sign up for her OnlyFans.
Yeah, I didn't sign up for her OnlyFans.
Right.
Kids.
But no, that is that's awesome. Let me ask you guys this. And I've talking to both of you a little bit, when we met in our Zoom meeting, and I absolutely love how much both of your passion radiates in terms of lighting for these animals. And this idea of like, yeah, sure, certain species can live, or just, they can survive, without it. But what is it about lighting that really makes you two tick that you guys are trying to advance it?
So this one is lighting was it was a big one for me. I've been hounding UV lighting and talking about UV lighting for over a decade when it comes to animals in captivity, and doing my own research on them on it, and studies in our home for about the past 7 to 8 years. Just seeing how different animals react to it and things like that, and researching every freaking paper. I mean, me and Erica have stacks of papers on UVA and UVB
They're
and reptiles.
binders now.
Binders of
I
articles on it.
organized it.
But for me, it really clicked for me once I realized how how beneficial and necessary UVA is in the hormonal regulation, especially with serotonin and natural behaviors and things like that. And that hit me really hard because I suffer from depression, and that's a serotonin dopamine imbalance. So I totally understand feeling that way. And it just, that moment it hit me that all of my animals in captivity that I'm not giving access to that wavelength of light feel like I do when I'm depressed.
Ironically, that triggered depression.
But like that,
Right.
that's an awful. All of a sudden, to just be like, I feel like I'm doing amazing, and then in one moment, just realize that all of my animals are suffering this, not suffering sadness or crushing anxiety. It's not that kind of depression.
No, it's lack of appetite.
Not wanting to get up and move, not being lethargic, not having that energy to go. You know, it's like having that buddy that's depressed, on sitting on the couch, doesn't want to leave, eats crap food, and that spirals into health issues and so many other issues that compound because of that. And as soon as that clicked in my head, I immediately saw it in every animal I saw. Every bearded dragon that sits under a heat light all day and doesn't move, they don't do that in the wild, and that's not a natural thing. Then you look at how fat they are and the muscle wasting and lack of energy and movement, and how just unnatural for a wild animal that likes to run around and eat and forage and utilize its environment to just sit there all day.
Or another one was green iguanas. Green iguanas in, you know, your house are one way, and a lot of people are like, oh, they're tractable and like I can play with them and stuff like that. And then you take them outside, and you usually hear the reports of people saying that the animal became more aggressive or tried to take off immediately, and it, you know, got brighter colors, and that's not a coincidence. It's, you know, because they actually got UVA.
Yeah. So that really kind of started me down that path, that along with the fact of my whole goal in keeping these animals is because I can't go, I never thought I would be able to go to every single country that these things come from, you know, and go see them all. And the whole thing is, if we can keep these guys in captivity, that's incredible. And we get this opportunity to view a window, literally a window into their life. But what good of a window is it into their natural behaviors in their life if we're distorting their natural behaviors?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, I think we see it a lot in Retics. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen people's collections or people take pictures, but you know, of just a retic in a smaller enclosure without light, just sitting in the same place, day in, day out, day in, day out.
Yeah, I just got a really cool picture actually from a zoo that just started installing our lighting, and I was down there.
Send that picture over to us, because I'll post edit into this.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, dude, it's gosh, she's got to be 19 feet. She's this big around. Big retic in this huge enclosure that goes down into the floor. It's really cool.
Nice.
And she like hung out the entire for like 2 months, and it's kind of coming into their cold season, so it's still a little chilly, and they can feel it. So like, she's kind of just been hunkered down into her cave with all her lighting, and this one Vivtech light was way up at the top on this ledge in the other opposite corner, and it took a while for her to come out, but I just got a picture from the zoo the other day of her up there, coiled all the way, sitting underneath it. There's no heat up there. There's nothing. There's no reason for her to want to be up there other than that one light bulb, and she's up there basking. The one that also
sent us a picture of the toad, the angry toad.
Yeah. Toads bask under our light, like literally come out to it and bask.
Sold them on it.
That's awesome. So
they got sold on it because of the toad that just.
Yeah, I got a call from the curator. Toads don't bask. What's going on? And I'm like, let me tell you what's happening. She's like, no, we turned it off and he hid. And the next day we turned it on. He came out for 12 hours and stood there. But if you don't turn the light on, he doesn't come out. What's going on? And I'm like, well, let me tell you what's happening with this toad and his brain.
So for someone getting into just messing around with your lights, what would be like your best piece of advice for them? Installing, just general things you think they may run into.
Because me and Nathan need this advice, because we just got your lighting, and we need to know what we're doing.
Yeah, do we need to like cage these things off? Are they free to just be like running into them?
They can.
Butters.
Sorry, idiot dogs.
You're good. You're
dreaming
good.
And whimpering and being idiots.
Well,
Hey, come here. Lay down. Oh, you're gonna start fighting or being dumb.
For the record, we hit the
it was a
bench
towel
on there. It's not the dogs for anybody watching.
Smacking him. No, so really when it comes to our lighting, there's a couple cool things about it. One, it has a quartz cover over the LEDs, so the light can get through there. Quartz doesn't filter out any of the UVA or UVB.
So
and
please do not take that out.
Yes, it's transmissible glass. Don't take it out. And it's got a screw-on cover that holds that tight in there, so that stops dust from getting up into the LEDs. It also makes it, it's not waterproof, but it makes it splash resistant. So your mister can spray the crap out of that bulb. It's going to be fine. It won't do anything.
2 minutes solid and no harm.
And then because they don't get hot, you can install them inside the enclosure. And you don't have to cage them or anything. I actually don't like caging bulbs unless I have to. Even heat lights, in certain instances, I won't cage. With a snake or something, absolutely. But with my Varanids, I actually don't cage my heat lights because if they touch it, they're immediately going to know it's hot. They learn and they don't touch it again. If I cage it, then they'll hang on it and fall asleep, and then they burn themselves. So with that kind of thing, like, yeah, you don't really need to cage them. Actually, I just installed a light in, it's a Stonewash Bredli, and I put her in, she's in like an 1824 little baby.
She's fine.
Yeah, she's a little baby. And she, I walked away and came back a half hour later. She's basking on the light. She's up on it, warming up, just sitting up there. So, yeah, so that's the nice thing. You have to worry about, like, and that makes it even better because anytime you can avoid the UV light going through a screen or going through something is best. So straight from the bulb to the animal is the best way to get any source of UV. Anything it goes through is going to degrade it or reduce the amount of output. So with these bulbs, because the animal can touch them and they're not hot and they're not going to hurt them, you can really install them inside almost any enclosure. And then, like you said, it's not going to raise the temperature, so it doesn't mess with your habitat parameters.
The nice part is that animals that are more prone to like flicker responses from like the lights. So when you if you're videoing your enclosure and then you play it back in slow motion, you can see like a strobe light effect.
Mm-hmm.
Your animals can also see that. And think of it like if you're in a strobe light area, it's painful to be in sometimes.
Yeah, fluorescent lighting. It's awful.
Exactly. And these are what these animals
I
are.
like going to clubs.
But these are what these animals are staying under. And with previous one that we could use, our Varanus spinulosus, which is spiny neck mangrove monitor, I think. Anyway, they were actually like literally like ripping them out of their sockets. They were getting rid of it. They were burying them into the substrate.
One of them learned to put it in his water dish.
Yep.
Because then I would have to take it apart to dry it out for like a couple days.
And then when we switched to our Vivtech ones, they have no problems. They come right out. They flatten themselves in a different way. So there's different basking behaviors that it'll start to see between temperature basking and UV basking. And they don't bother the lighting at all. So it also is a lot better for animals that are a little bit more skittish, especially if they're more prone to being eaten by birds. So this is really like a nice option for those species too.
Awesome. I got a question for you, and this is a noob question and something that I don't remember fully. That's the great thing about like having you guys on, and this is, mine and Nathan's podcast that we're doing, and we always talk about on here that we're not experts. We're always willing to learn. Like we're having you guys on, and this is purely educational for us. So one thing that I see hyped all the time, like 24/7 when it comes to lighting, everybody is UVB, 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 UVB. So can you explain a little bit about what UVB is? And then also, is there any other UV spectrum other than B? Because I'm assuming if they have a UVB, maybe it's A through Z. I don't know. I'm assuming there's other letters in there. So can you just talk about that and just give our listeners some informative content, without taking us into like the 5th hour of the episode, because I'm sure you can do this forever, but
I got this. All right, so we'll run it backwards.
Was that more of like a self hype? Like I got this.
I can do this.
Well, because I'm like, I can explain it. Not 5 hours.
Yeah, I will explain it in not 5 hours.
There's a
generally,
lot of tangents
generally
about
when we're talking about ultraviolet lighting, so ultraviolet lighting is everything that is shorter wavelength lighting from south of the visual spectrum of violet, purple. So past that, what we can see. The other way you go red. So it's red through purple, right? So ultraviolet is that way. So that's under under 400 nanometers in wavelength. Ultraviolet light's broken up into pretty much 4 sections. You have UVZ or X or non-terrestrial UV. Then you have UVC, UVB, and UVA. So UVZ or X or whatever you want to call it, we're never going to see. It doesn't get through the ozone. The only way to ever come in contact with it is to go into outer space and then go outside of a craft. And
You
then
have to be an astronaut.
yeah, you're never going to see it. And then UVC is also filtered by the ozone, but UVC is naturally created by fluorescent bulbs, mercury vapor bulbs, tons of other different bulbs, and it's actually used in sterilization. So when you have a hospital sterilizer or your fish sterilizers and fish systems, those use UVC. And UVC...
Oh, sterilizing like clean. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
like
the ones they
cleaning
were
sterilizer.
using
Okay.
for during like the hype of COVID, they were selling those wands or like the toothbrush container.
Gotcha.
That's UVC lighting.
Yep.
Okay.
So that breaks down biological material and degrades DNA and things like that. So
That doesn't sound
what
good for animals.
No, it's bad for animals. It's good for us if like you're trying to clean water to drink. It doesn't kill the things in the water. It just makes it so those things can't reproduce. And if they can't reproduce in your system, they can't create enough of a bioload to make you sick. So that's how that works. So that's what UVC is. Then you have UVB, and that's what everybody talks about with reptiles. And what we end up, the UVB and UVA are very similar to how we look at health in the United States and just in humanity. Physical health. If someone let's say someone pulls in, you pull up to a store, and you see someone pull into a handicap spot, and they get out and just walk right into the store. The first thing you do is you're like, what? That should be safe for somebody with a handicap. Like,
Start smashing windows.
Right, like people get mad, but at the same time, you don't. It's physical health and physical visual like negative things happening to us versus mental health, internal health, things that are under the surface,
Which is
and that's
UVA.
Which is UVA, exactly.
Okay.
So when you're looking at UVB, that
was a strange metaphor.
it's the stigma between mental health and physical health within our own system.
I get it.
That
we
one would have
need
been a better
both.
one than the handicap.
So here's
parking.
no, hold on. So it's the whole idea that with physical health in general, we give it more weight. We give someone that has
We believe
lost
what we can see.
a limb more weight as a detriment than someone like Erica's dealing with migraines. That's a hard thing to show other than she has a headache. So like that's something that can completely knock her out, but it's hard to see. So again, that's kind of what we look at with BNA. With UVB, if the animal, with many animals or reptiles that we keep, need UVB in order to synthesize vitamin D3, which is needed to metabolize the calcium that they're getting through their diet and use it in their bodies. Without UVB, they can't do that, and then they eventually slowly degrade. They start pulling calcium out of their bones. They become hypocalcemic, get what we've always referred to as metabolic bone disease, and then eventually they die. Because they slowly degrade, they have physical ailments you can see, and then death as a result. We understand that UVB is very necessary. However, even with UVB, most people will argue that it's only necessary for animals that die if they don't have it.
Right.
Which
Die quickly.
Die quickly if they don't have it. Like, which, yes, that's a bare minimum requirement for those animals, but all living things utilize UVB lighting.
For instance, leopard geckos, it's, just assumed that they last maybe, 10 years
Yeah.
in captivity. And then you're tapped out and you're like, hey, I got 11 years. This is pretty good. There's no reason that they can't live longer. Ball pythons live longer than, 18, 19 years. I have a friend who's got one in the higher 30s, almost 40. So with good care and proper care, they can live longer. And so we're finding that animals that have the quick death syndrome from not having UVB are the ones that always get the attention and really drive the campaigns. But the slower death ones, such as the poor leopard gecko, the crested gecko, the ball python, things like that, aren't necessarily getting the drive for UVB.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. But there's studies out there that corn snakes utilize UVB to synthesize D3. Massasauga rattlesnakes synthesize D3 with UVB. There's so many different animals that people say don't need it that do utilize it. Even like Komodo dragons, which eat huge meals, have to have access to UVB because they can't get enough D3 from their meals. So zoos that have Komodo dragons have to be able to let them outside because they have to get natural sunlight. They don't get enough UVB to not have natural sunlight.
And the current models that were out before our LEDs wasn't able to actually provide enough.
Yeah.
So that's UVB, and then you have UVA, and UVA starts to get into the endocrine system and hormones and serotonin management, oxytocin management. But the easiest way to explain UVA is when you walk outside and it's a sunny day and it hits your face and you just feel a little bit better, versus a day where it's cloudy and rainy and crappy and then you just kind of feel and you just go on with your day.
I mean, seasonal affective disorder is like a real thing. Like people who live in Alaska and people who live in, in the Pacific Northwest, higher rates of depression.
People are bulbs to Alaska.
Even in the Mountain West, when we have all of our like winter months when it's just, covered in smog and snow, a lot of us start supplementing with lights too.
Exactly.
And those mood lights and those lights to help with
First
that are literally UVA emitting lights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Nathan, your sleeve's tripping me out. It's like the same color as your shirt. And
where does it begin?
Right? Like I thought you were literally wearing a long sleeve because your little like name tag is blocking the rest of your arm.
Nope.
That's what I thought too.
Nope. It's an illusion.
It's an illusion.
It worked.
Okay, so just to recap, UVC, stay the hell away from.
No, that's bad.
Yeah, don't introduce that.
You'll never naturally be exposed to it unless you're a solar flare. But.
Yep.
Right. UVB is for physical appearance. That's kind of like your handicap parking and a bearded dragon that is going through metabolic bone disease. Like they would use the handicap spot for sure.
Yep.
Oh my God! Why did
we wouldn't be mad? Because
exactly, and we wouldn't be mad. But if a bearded dragon just like leisurely walked into the store using the handicap, then we'd be pissed. Exactly. And then UVA is for that deeper mental health enrichment, that kind of feel good feeding, like you said, increasing serotonin, dopamine. There's no reason, and I'm ignorant on this, which I probably shouldn't be considering my career field, but I wonder if there's studies on snakes and different things in regards to dopamine, serotonin. The prevalence. Yeah, no, I mean, and that's the thing is, I don't think there'd be, if there were a lot out there, I'm sure I would have found them by now because I'm a big nerd for neurotransmitters and physiobiology and all that stuff. But,
well, up until not too long ago, most reptiles were just seen as dumb, prehistoric, non-thinking.
Snakes or lizards have play behavior, and we literally watch Arboretus spinulosus. Now that they're under our lights, we have a trio, and one of them plays with our Frenchie. Like, we'll go up to the enclosure and be like, what? And then, like, run this way, run that way. Yeah. The other two don't want anything to do with it, but that one actually, the moment he walks in, exhibits play behavior.
Yeah.
And that's something that for a very long time, it wasn't thought that they could actually exhibit play behavior. The only ones I think they thought could was crocodilians, because they did some more studies on that, and then they found out that they even like classical music.
Tokays play.
Yeah.
Baby tokays play with their parents. Mm-hmm. It's super cool. Like, the most vicious, psychotic gecko that wants to eat your face is the sweetest dad on the planet.
Hell, science hardly wanted to find out that snakes had clitorises until this point.
Right, and go figure, it took a woman to find it.
As Erica walks away.
Yeah, but like, so even just not even so the hormonal stuff and the endocrine balancing and all that is awesome, but that's not even the only thing UVA does. So the other things is like they can see it. Almost all reptiles, many of them can see UVA. Actually, some of them can even see into the UVB spectrum, which is super freaking cool. So they can actually regulate their UV based on their sight, which is cool. But the other, so and then, as a lot of people have noticed over the past couple, probably again 5, 6, 7 years, there's been a lot of more papers about bioluminescence in reptiles, and then it expanded out to bioluminescence in all these different, even mammals.
Hedgehogs.
Yeah, and and it's bioluminescence, but not in like. Don't think about the algae where you walk through the water and it glows and we can see it.
Yeah, that's what everyone first thinks of.
Exactly.
I thought of Moana.
They don't glow in the dark.
Algae.
Bioluminescent algae.
I love you.
but so they can see that, and then, but what we're seeing with the bioluminescence in the animals is actually under UVA wavelengths, that they can see that in broad daylight. They can see that, we can't, and it makes sense. You look at like 2 small little desert geckos on 2 dunes away from each other. They can see each other. I can't see them. They're the same color as the sand and they're this big, but they can see each other because they glow to each other.
Well, there's also the pheromone trails. So for a long time, it was believed that like snakes especially could only follow pheromone trails with their Jacobson's organ, and that if they didn't have obviously like a working tongue or a working Jacobson's organ, they were at a severe disadvantage. It turns out that they can also see the pheromone trails of conspecifics or even like prey items based on UV spectrum. So that is something that we never gave a lot of like thought into, but the UVA spectrum is not only important for things, but it's also an honest indicator of health, because the way that the UV reflects off of an animal, they have no control over that. And so when another one sees it, it's actually an honest indicator of health, rather than them just being like, hello, I'm pretty.
I just had like an epiphany moment. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever had to go through like feeding a bunch of hatchling snakes before. But oftentimes you'll have those that bite constrict and then they're just young and dumb and they can't find the head. And then the rat cools down and then you just wake up the next morning and you're like, oh, it's there. I'm almost wondering if there was a way to get UV lighting into their enclosures, if that would actually reflect off of the animal and it would be easier for them to find.
So there are no official studies on UVA and feeding response. But there are a lot of anecdotal evidence that it actually does improve poor appetite animals, like appetite in poor feeders. That's where I wanted. You're not helping with this. You're just kind of staring.
I'm just letting you go. You got this.
For poor feeders, and it is because they can see their prey differently. So that's how they learn what to eat and what not to eat, is because they're looking for the UVA bouncing off of it, and it helps them with prey selection. And if you're curious on how I know a lot of this, it's also from these 2 new books that just came out.
Oh, I thought you were going to pull out one of your binders.
Yeah, The Secret Social Lives of Reptiles. This is actually, she was showing me a lot of this. I'm going to have to read it now that she read it. But
You're
it's
not
actually
gonna read it.
super
You're just
cool.
going to read the highlighted parts.
Well, yeah, you just highlight all the parts I need to know. That's
there
why
you go.
Read it first.
So what I think is great about everything that you're saying is like the idea, the statement that you guys were making of like every animal and living organism utilizes UVA and UVB. And like it's kind of common sense if we break it down, because they live outside. So they're doing something with it, right?
Yeah.
Unless they're like a cave dwelling, never seeing the sun, or those crazy fish that live so far down that they're super ugly. But at the at the end of the day,
None
though,
of the
like
reviewers, don't worry.
95% of the animals that we're keeping in captivity, probably even more than that, it's got to serve a function, because they're out in the wild using it.
Even fossorial animals do have access in the wild to UV, whether it's because something just dug their ass up, and that's why, or because they come up. At some point, they do come up and then move and then go back under.
Is that is that the fancy way to describe ugly sea creatures?
No, like,
fossorial? Is that what they are?
No,
Is that what you're?
Fossorial is when they're under the. As I'm making swimming motions.
Under the dirt.
They're under the dirt.
Okay.
So they're like the tunneling species. Your sand boas.
Sunbeam snakes.
Jesus, I just lost my thought completely.
Calabar burrowing pythons.
There you go. He's got the list.
Sicilians.
You guys are
Not
great
a reptile,
together.
but yes. This is why we complete each other's random tangent thought. Where the hell's I going?
I don't know.
Oh, so the fossorial animals actually do get to interact with UV, but a lot of it isn't direct UV. You're not going to necessarily see them just laying out there and being like, hey, I'm sunbathing. They're actually getting refracted UV. And so we're not taking into consideration in a lot of our husbandry endeavors refracted light, because it bounces off of stones, it bounces off of tile if you use tile, but it bounces off of stones, tile, sand, because of all the quartz in it and silica. It bounces off of that. It even bounces off of water. And yes, your animals that live in water can still use UVB and UVA, because UVA goes right through water and UVB does just not quite as much.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think
just,
that...
I was gonna say, just as a side note, so, and this is something I didn't get to say on recently on a different forum that I wanted to say. We can continue as a hobby to argue about whether the animals need UV or not, but the reality is, like, what we're asking is, can this animal stay alive without it? Not will it thrive and does it do well, and are we keeping them ethically and in a way that enhances all their natural behaviors? Just, will it be not dead?
Yeah.
And that's the cutoff.
And will it still...
Speaking of cutoff...
What are you doing?
Speaking of cutoff... I don't know why it's but I think that's a great question that needs to be, like... I've talked about this, like, on our fireside chat that we had, that our Patreon viewers got to see. Which, by the way, if you are not a member of our Patreon, there's an awesome chat that we had at an Arlington show talking about all this lighting and cool stuff that I forgot because for many reasons.
El Gato. That's
El
me.
Gato.
It's going to come back. Just
That is. You are the cats.
I knew.
But, and that's why we wanted to have you guys on to talk about this, because I think what we saw a lot of early days in Retic keeping was convenience for the keeper.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we still do.
Well, yeah, I was getting there. Jeez.
Sorry.
I think we see that in all reptiles, but
Oh, yeah.
especially when it comes to large constrictors.
Right. It's convenience because, you know, my mindset, I'm thinking like, okay, Retics, crazy feeding response. They get big, really inquisitive and social. So that's convenient for us when we want them out and they're nice. But when it comes to like husbandry, everything is as convenient and easy as possible, because people who want to breed these animals usually end up having way too many and don't give them they're not trying to make them thrive. And so when we had that conversation early on, it sparked this man, Ryan, why are you messing with it? It was perfect. There we go.
Did it come back?
We're back.
All right.
We're back. Leave it.
He was messing with the
touching.
Settings.
This is the engineer
I don't know why it
issue.
keeps doing that.
This is why marrying an engineer is difficult sometimes. Because
Yeah.
you can't just let it sit. He has to fix it. I do not.
So it really changed and challenged the way that I thought about, like, you know, Retics. So one big driving force that's kind of encouraged me to try and do more for my animals is a lot of these newcomers that are coming into the hobby, and they're like buying these super dwarf Retics and they're buying Retics, and they're showing all of us out by getting these massive, naturalistic, beautiful enclosures. And then the people who've been doing this for a long time are just like, I keep them in a 4-foot vision. Right. And so that drove this passion of like, how can I, you know, I am a breeder. I do breed. And so I do have more than just 2 Retics in my garage, right? And so I want to be able to, of course, make my process streamlined, but still find a way to where my animals are still getting the maximum potential of health and enrichment that they can absolutely get. Because my biggest fear, and that drives me to be, better in terms of like being a breeder and keeping Retics, is to not fall into the trap of like having a bunch, neglecting them. You know, the same thing that we see a lot of people who you know, are massive in the industry and just pumping these animals out and just neglecting their animals. And so when we had that conversation, I was like, why not do lighting? Like, why? Like, it's literally the difficulty to go through is spending a little bit more money, which, let's be realistic, most Retic breeders out there, you don't need another Retic. You can buy lighting for your snakes, and all you have to do is just screw 4 things in and mount the light in. And it's not really that hard to do. And the potential, like, if you don't do it, We don't know. Like, your snake might die at 15 years because it doesn't have the UVA and UVB. If you do it, the snake can still get away. There's no harm, no foul. All you're doing is increasing the potential for more enrichment, better health, better mental health. And that's exactly why we wanted to have you on and introduce our affiliate sponsorship that you guys have been so awesome to bring us along this. So
well, and so Retic pythons, and I think you guys, this might be a huge benefit to these bulbs in the UVA that we're talking about. Retic pythons in captivity unfortunately generally become obese and overweight. Just a lack of ability to move around a lot, and they're a very big animal, so they hold weight.
We also try to keep them like berms.
Right, and then that generally leads to a lot of dystocia and egg binding. So you get a lot of egg binding in these bigger snakes, and UVA has a direct correlation to oxytocin management in the animal system, and we've actually. There's a company using our bulbs on all of their breeder animals, and they actually had one of their animals that was egg bound. It was a small agama that was egg bound, and they were waiting for her to push out the rest of her eggs. It had been about 4 days, so they decided to try our bulb and see if it would make a difference. And the next day, she laid all the eggs.
that's insane.
We actually have some Europlatus that came in, and again, same kind of issue. You know, they came in, they had eggs already that were developing, but we have no idea how far along they are or any of that. And one of the females wasn't looking as good as she should have been because she was trying to develop eggs. We threw her under our Sure Sun. We actually put her under our first call because it's a lower UVB amount but a higher UVA, and she came out immediately, full-blown bass, like full-body bass, and then it would cryptically bass, so she'd have like her tail hanging out right where the light is so she could get it, or like she put her little nose out or her toe, because people don't understand they don't need large amounts of their body. So when you're doing thermal regulation, you need to have a large amount of your body exposed to the heat or exposed to the cooler side to allow for that thermal regulation. With UV, you don't need a large amount. You only need a small amount to actually get the benefits from it, which is why cryptic basking is such an amazing thing. Otherwise, all those shade-dwelling animals, so like anoles that live in the branches, peacock monitors that live in the branches, boiga for heaven's sake, they would never have any UVB effects because they have all the scattered light coming through. So cryptic basking is like literal proof that you only need to have a small amount exposed, which is why we also recommend the spotlight for things like, for animals like Retics, so that they can put like a small amount of their tail out maybe, and then like curl it back in.
Well, and that comes to, and it's not all animals, it's not all reptiles, but like all of the stuff that people say don't need it, like basically your zone, anything that's Ferguson zone 1, zone 2, lower UV output animals, those animals have much thinner skin. They don't have a crystalline structure under their skin to reflect a lot of the UV back. An animal like a rhino iguana sitting on white sands in the Caribbean at the equator at noon in July.
In limestone.
That animal needs to reflect some of that UV back, or it's going to be a piece of burnt jerky in an afternoon.
Bearded dragons with the black skin underneath.
Exactly. So, but there was a study on Texas banded geckos. And banded geckos throughout the day will put just their head at the entrance to their hole, just enough light hits their head.
So
and they'll only sit there, just the tip, for about 15 minutes. And then that's all the UV they need is the surface area of their head for 15 minutes a day, and that's enough. Same thing for us. We only need about 15 minutes outside to get enough of the UV that we need to utilize, because our skin is so much more transparent and allows a lot more of that light to come through. So yeah, that's why the cryptic basking with a lot of those species that people say don't need it. Well, they don't need intense light, and they won't die without it, but they absolutely use it.
Well, they do die. It's just slowly over years.
Right, but they can live long lives without it. It's a much better way to have them with their lives.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel excited. Like, okay, I'm gonna be honest. I'm not excited to install the lighting, but I'm excited to start utilizing it. And that's just because I'm lazy. I got a lot going on. And so, but I'm excited to actually see some behavioral changes within my animals, and I want to kind of dip into a project that the Retic Lounge, myself, and Erica and Ryan with Vivtech Products is working on. About a month ago, maybe more than a month ago, we finalized kind of like a informal formal study that we're going to be doing using Vivtech Products lighting. So let me just kind of explain a little bit about what we're doing, and then Erica, Ryan, I'd love for you to give some feedback on this. What would you guys like to see within the study? And I know we talked about this a little bit, but I'd love our viewers and listeners to be able to hear that. Nice US Arc beanie.
Oh, yeah.
I
Nate.
was just looking at them like, how do we get one?
Right?
No,
I every
we
time
need
I
a
see it,
beanie.
I want it. Nate, we're talking about your beanie. Yeah, so for those of you guys that aren't aware, I ran into a pair of 2022 pure Halmahera low-calorie reticulated pythons. The wild caught animals that they came from are not the nicest, and that reflects in these animals that I have. Now, they are babies, and so I'm not saying that they are mean, but they are very defensive. And what I mean by that is like defensive to the point where they're terrified when I hold the female. She'll constrict me, not because she wants to eat, but because she just is so scared that that's all she does is just wrap my hand as tight as she can.
Doesn't know what to do.
She doesn't. She's literally, and I'm just like, I'm not going to hurt you. Like, I've done everything in my power to convince you I'm not going to hurt you. So right now, I'm keeping them in a tub setup because they're hatchlings and because that's what most breeders do. You guys have heard my thoughts on that. I am moving out of that as soon as I can financially with getting smaller enclosures for all of my holdbacks and animals that I keep that are babies. But Focus Cube was nice enough to provide me with an enclosure that has 2 perches. It's their 2XL, so it's a 30 inch length by 24 by 24. So first of all, I was shocked by just the 30 24 24 with how big it was. I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing. And so it has a shelf on there, it has a sky hide, and it has Vivtech Products lighting. And so what we are going to be doing is running a study on this female Halmahera that is terrified and defensive and a jerk to me. I'm going to be putting her first in there for, I don't know, what would you guys say is a good amount? Like 3 weeks, 4 weeks in terms of like no lighting and just paper substrate, right? Just to kind of get used to it, nothing different, right? So we'll do that for about 3 to 4 weeks just to probably see that her baseline of being scared is bigger because she's in a much larger enclosure now.
Yeah.
And then what we want to do, so ultimately, is I want to observe feeding response as a behavior, inquisitiveness as a behavior, and defensiveness as a behavior. So those are the 3 behaviors that I'm going to be looking at, taking notes on, studying, observing with this animal. And then after that time of just no lighting, paper, and the hides in there, we are then going to turn on the Vivtech bulb, keeping it bare minimum. Besides, insert, right? We're gonna
please, because it needs to.
right, exactly. So we are then going to turn on that Vivtech bulb, which I believe I am using the jungle. What's the medium tier that you guys have?
Jungle cover.
Yep.
Jungle cover, yeah. So Vivtech Products has 3 bulbs. They have like a mild version of it that is meant for what, 8 to 12 inches?
Yep, just about 12 inches of depth, and that's our first call.
Yeah,
Can
first
be
call.
further down, but that's just going to be zone 1 all
Right.
the way down. So.
Exactly. And then they have their jungle cover, which kind of pushes it even deeper, about 18 to 20,
24.
24.
18, yeah.
And then for you bearded dragons and those of you that need high intensity UV spectrum lighting, they have the
Midday Blaze.
Midday Blaze. That's awesome. Just like I picture the bearded dragon smoking a joint.
Is this the same one that parked in the handicap spot, or the one that just walked
Because
in?
he might have a medicinal script for that.
Right. Exactly.
Please do not give marijuana to your bearded dragons. That's not
Exactly.
what we're endorsing.
I'm going to add to the pro scene here that Nathan is looking at your products on the website right now, seeing if I can actually. Can I get this on here?
Are you spying on his computer?
No, I could see the. Hold on, I'm going to transition here. I'm transitioning. Okay, so Nathan, go ahead while I talk. Just go through that website.
Yeah,
they have a great website. It's super awesome to use.
Updated it.
Yeah, thank you guys.
It just
Shout
shows
out to Justine Labello for creating this.
Yeah, that's who created our website. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's your UV. That's your UV kind of output for the jungle cover. And the top of that is at about 4 inches. Actually, about 4 inches from the bulb. Assuming that most people are going to put it in the dome and it's going to have a screen stuff there. So, yeah, your basking distance for that animal is going to.
Before you go any further, it does say the word danger. It is not danger like, holy crap, my animal's going to die if it gets that close. What we're saying is if you have like a 6-inch cage and you put it on there, it's going to be in zone 4 and 5. And that's a little high for a lot of those
all
animals.
the time.
Yeah.
Yes. So we are revamping the label to put zone 4 on there and then like zone 5 so people can see. Because almost all of our reptiles stay between zone 1 and zone 4. And they're happy little critters. The danger is not like terrifying.
The only way it's dangerous is if you took your gecko and stuck it in a test tube that's that shape and then stuck that light on there and never turned it off. Then it's bad.
Well, then you're just a dick.
Right. Well, but no, if you use your UV index meter and you get up into that range, you'll get a really high reading. There is no UVC or shortwave UVB, which is what you're trying to read with the UV index to see if it's dangerous. But there is UVB and UVA, and when you get that close, it's such a high rate because you're very close to the bulb that it spikes the UV index up. It's not an indicator that the lighting is actually dangerous, but that could cause an incredibly high UV output if an animal was sequestered under it and not able to move. But again, because it's a cone and a 3-dimensional gradient, these animals can move in and through and away from it.
Yeah.
Yep. But we're taking the danger is actually zone 4.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense to remove that because I have seen people use your products and have snakes literally wrap around the light, and they're completely fine.
Yep.
So, anyways, again, observations and behaviors I'm going to be observing is defensiveness, inquisitiveness, and feeding response. I want to do feeding response intentionally because of that UVA. Inquisitiveness because it's one of the biggest, like, if you were to go and ask on any Facebook forum in a Retic group, like one of the best things about Retics, they will say inquisitive, curious nature, right? Yep. So the paper is going to outline what exactly we mean by inquisitiveness, and then defensiveness. So what I'm going to be doing is after we turn that light bulb on, that's stage 2 of the study. After I turn that light bulb on, I am then going to, after a few months, going to then just add Repti chip on the bottom. So now we're giving it some texture. We're going to kind of liven up the party here in the enclosure and give it somewhat of a more realistic feel when it's on the floor. And then we're going to do the same thing, continue measuring those differences of behaviors. One thing that I do want to note. So in the sky hide, it'll be bare naked for the first 2 phases. And then once we introduce Repti chip, I will be putting Sphagnum. Yeah, sorry, I messed that one up again.
It's an awful word to read.
It is Sphagnum. Sphagnumos. I'm going to be putting that inside the sky hide. So then kind of giving it that humid area to be in, right? And then the final phase 4, is, and Lord help me here, I'm going to go bioactive with this. I'm going to try to include 1 live plant in there. I'm going to get an entire ecosystem for this enclosure that I'm super stoked for. It's going to be my first bioactive, so I will include that in the study. If I butched it, if I messed it up, I will have the information.
We got your back. If you have any questions, we can walk you through all that stuff.
All of our enclosures are bioactive.
So,
yeah. So then that'll be phase 4 that we'll measure for another 3 months or so. And the idea behind this is to do one. It would be nice to have a 1 year, because at about 1 year from her age now, she's probably going to outgrow that enclosure anyways. And so that's when it's basically going to end, because then I'll need to upgrade her enclosure, and that'll bring too many variables and changes, that would impact the study. So super excited to have you guys on board with that, and thank you again, Focus Cube, for sending me that 2XL enclosure. It's beautiful, by the way. But so for those of you listening in, and you're still listening, we're going to be doing probably periodic updates on the podcast as one of the episodes to talk about some of the findings that I'm seeing. Probably like after each phase, we'll do like an update. And yeah, I mean, so what I've talked about so far, Erica and Ryan, I have a question for y'all. What affordable, realistic tool can I use to actually measure the output of UVB or UVA, or what's important to be measured? Like what?
Oh, sorry. Go.
No, I was just going to reiterate what I stated, because I repeat myself over and over.
I have strong feelings on UV readers.
Okay.
So
No, please. No,
Stop.
please. No, I want you to share, because I've actually had some people that were like, oh, you need to make sure that you get these readers and these readers, because you need to see how much they're actually putting out and if it's true to what the bulb says. And,
Unless those people are telling you to buy a spectral radiometer, which will actually tell you the wavelengths between 1 to 2 nanometers.
Is that the one you have on your website?
No, that's
Nope.
the Ocean Optics. So we
Yeah,
actually have one from Ocean Optics right now.
The one we're talking about, the photospectrometers, they
Is
run
like-
between $10,000 and $30,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you also have to buy a probe that's
And a whole bunch of
special
other stuff for it,
things.
yeah.
And then the cable
And then
is
get it-
also separate.
And then you have to calibrate every single piece independently and as a system.
Yep. And you have to send it in for that.
So what I'm
Anyway.
hearing is that you guys are going to be over at my garage pretty soon.
Yeah, we'll bring it over. It's easy.
So the nice thing is, though, like this spectrometer we have is small. It's small enough. We're actually able to do some readings, and we're hoping this next year to do some live readings in the wild. But
Is that the
I'm
one?
just a little bit more nervous because I
What's-
don't want to recalibrate it because it's expensive to calibrate it.
What's the one on your website? Because Nathan stopped sharing the
I got
screen.
it.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
So that's just a UV. That's a UVB reader. When it comes to reading UV wavelengths, most people will tell you to either use a what is it, the 6.2 or 6.5 solar meter. So a 6.2 reads UVB peak wavelengths around 300 nanometers, and then
I thought
the
it was 320.
no, it's 300, and then the 6.5 reads the UV index. The UV index, or the UV index, or the UVI, or the 6.5, that's a weighted formula of UVC, shortwave UVB, and UVA that gives you a reading of how dangerous the light is. Basically, it was made by a Canadian meteorologist to tell you based on how fair your skin is, how quickly you get a sunburn.
Yep.
The problem with it is that it's a formula. The sun is pretty consistent in its outputs, barring seasonality. Like every day, if we went out at the same time and it was the same weather, you get about the same reading.
It was based off
With-
of like late spring, early
Well,
fall
and-
temperature.
But that's what what I'm saying is the sun always has the same output.
Yeah.
Generally, again, barring environmental changes and weather changes and things like that, but the sun generally has the same output. So, using getting the UV index for sunburns makes sense. When you're using that same one for man-made lighting, I can trick it, and it doesn't totally read perfectly. The lights aren't creating sunlight. They're creating different wavelengths that are utilized by animals, and depending on how you position the wavelengths, you can change the UV the UVI. So I showed that on another podcast I did, the Animals at Home podcast. I actually did it live. I did an LED that I got from China from some random manufacturer that looks really good under the UV index and the UVB
oh yeah,
meter.
you would put it like right on your animal and not even care.
But if I put it under my spectrometer, it's mostly shortwave
Radio
UVB
spectrometer.
radio spectrometer. It's mostly shortwave UVB and UVC, and it's incredibly dangerous for your animal.
But it does have UVB, which is why the UVB reader reads it, because radio meters, which is what UVB meters are, they are looking for a certain wavelength, so they only take one part. So they're only looking for like the UVB part, but it's got like a gap of like 30 nanometers. So it could actually be saying one thing, but it's on like the super high end where we're looking towards the UVC, or it could be on the super low end. You're not sure if it's actually if it's something that you could actually make vitamin D with. You might just have UVB.
Yeah. Oh, Lucas, you're still muted.
It's the trend for 2023.
Dude,
we haven't
this is
created the
bad.
Nathan You're Muted merch yet, so it's actually transitioning just into Lucas You're Muted.
Man,
but
first 2 episodes of the year, and I'm just getting ripped right now.
sucks to suck.
Oh man. So what I was going to say, I'm over here coughing to death. That's why I'm muting myself. Okay. So, what I was going to say was to kind of reflect on what I'm hearing is that a lot of the tools that are out there that you can buy for $100, $200, I think it goes back to that convenience thing. It's going to measure only what you want to see it being measured, and it doesn't necessarily give it the actual range of how good the product is for your animal.
And realistically, what it is there's nothing made to check reptile wavelengths. What we're looking at is meters that are used to check sunlight and other scientific measurements for UVA, UVB, whatever, and for light outputs for in different industries for totally different stuff. There is not a meter that reads 295 to 310, which is where reptiles synthesize
Radiometer.
There's not a radiometer available that it shows just that. It only looks at that. So
She corrects you so beautifully. Like, it's so nice.
right, like in a very nice
like,
way.
right?
Not shut up, idiot. That's usually
Never say that to you.
not on camera.
Rude.
No, but no. So that's yeah. So
So,
going with it now. But no. So like that's the thing. There's nothing out there that's made exactly for us. So we utilize what we can. When it
Okay.
comes to the UV index, what the UV index of the 6.5 meter is going to tell you is if it goes really high at 12 inches, you can expect that there's probably some shortwave UVB or UVC in there. But again, without a what? Photospectrometer. I want to say that, but that's wrong.
Spectral
Spectral radiographometer. Radiographometer meterizer.
Go.
the $10,000
expensive
one.
one. With the expensive one, you can see the actual wavelengths. Yeah, no. So unless you actually use that, there's no way to know for sure. You have to trust the manufacturers and what they're and utilize what you can to try and get as close as you can. But that's the thing. Everyone needs to understand. Every single meter reads differently. All of them are calibrated differently. Every
no
single
standard.
photo sensor works differently. Yep. There's no standard, and none of them are made to read reptile UV wavelengths. They're made to read the entire wavelength spectrum of that spectrum. So we're not going to get a perfect reading from anything.
And artificial versus natural versus LED.
And that can also change how some of those actually read. The one on our website is a UVB reader, and the reason we went with just the straight UVB meter is because when you're looking at the degradation of a bulb, in my eyes, this is the best way to look at it. One, you can tell that it has UVB right off the bat. It's not perfect. It's not saying it has the perfect wavelength of UVB. It might end up that it's a little higher or lower, whatever, but you're going to get a reading from it. And from there, if you are buying a bulb from a manufacturer in the United States, Zoomed, Exoterra, Zilla, Vivtech, Arcadia, any of those guys, anybody that's that's sold at stores, actual manufacturers, not random, who knows, out of China on Amazon. If you're buying those, you can trust that those products have been tested. You should be able to trust that, and then they should have graphs and things like that will allow you to see what kind of readings you should get. That UV meter right there, that reads UVB. So what it's going to do is when you turn on your light, when you first get your UV light, your say fluorescent tube, you're going to use that to figure out the UVB output at 12 inches away, and then you're going to record that. Over time, fluorescents, mercury vapors, and metal halides lose their UV output. It degrades over time because they're using up the phosphors inside that shift that wavelengths. It's a chemical process that burns them up, so they degrade over time.
You sound like you're an engineer or something.
I know, right?
My God.
So as they degrade,
Explain first why there are phosphors in there and why it's important to know
shifts
about
it from
degrading.
you. That's a whole deep lighting talk.
In a nutshell, you have to have the phosphors to actually create the UVA and the UVB.
Okay.
That's why it's important if they're degrading. Now continue.
I don't remember what I was saying.
Yes, you do. It's degrading. Degrading the
Who was degrading who?
phosphorus.
So using the UVB meter, you can get an initial reading, and then every month you can test it again. Test it from the same distance in the same spot, 12 inches to the bulb, and keep track of that. Once the bulb reduces 30%, that's when you need to replace it. Now, the nice thing is let's say you have a lot of different animals and you utilize both desert-style UV bulbs and tropical-style UV bulbs. The desert-style output, once it degrades 30%, is still higher than the tropical output, so you can take those bulbs and then just move them over to a different animal that doesn't need as high of an output.
On your fluorescence.
On your fluorescence. On your Vivtech LEDs, you never have to replace them, so you don't have to worry about it. But that is why...
you never have to.
Well, once in 4 years you don't.
Someone's going to quote you on that.
Yeah, not never. But you're not going to get that degradation in 6 months. You shouldn't see it over the lifespan of the bulb. But that's really what that's for. Is that UVB allows you to get a range of what the output is when you first buy it, and then a way to actually track it so that you can figure out when your bulb needs to be replaced. Because fluorescents, mercury vapors, and metal halides all reduce their output to 0 and still work as a light. Because people have to remember, you can't see the light that comes out of that your animal needs. And that's actually part of the reason that we really wanted to push with the LEDs, because I think it's an insane fallacy in reptile husbandry. I think it's crazy. One of the most important things your animal needs to not die is a bulb that emits a light that you can't see, that degrades over time, that you can't tell, and it'll still work when it stops working.
Right.
Yep.
Like that, you're literally setting up every mom and little kid to fail.
Right.
Like, why? I have yet to find one person who can tell me, and all your listeners, anybody, name one thing that you replace in your house, even though it works just like it did the day you bought it. And
Or you assume it does.
Because you can't see the light it puts out. So
I don't even replace the batteries on my fire alarm.
Let alone like a bulb that it turns on, it's emitting light. Why would you replace
the reptile
it?
keeper.
Oh, come on. I did it again. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think it comes on naturally when we need to cut you off, Ryan.
That's it.
I have a button. You just don't know.
It's like the Oscar
I
music.
figured it out. There's some kind of sleep timer on there or something.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that was the short answer.
So, I want to touch on one more. I want to touch on one more thing before we wrap up, and this might be a touchy subject, but I want to touch on a study that was done by Liquor.
Serena Wonderlick.
Serena Wonderlick, Dr. Serena Wonderlick. Yes.
Yes. Sorry. I'm sure she's a lovely lady. I am so sorry, Sabrina. Or is it Dr. Wonderlick?
You are going to be
amazing,
banned
very
from the
amazing
reptile
woman.
lighting group now. They're going to be like, nope.
No.
We know
I'm
how
not-
Lucas was trying to remember the name now. All right, just
Anyway,
remember
yeah, so
Liquor.
the study.
The study.
Can we make t-shirts that say Dr. Liquor?
It'll be one of those like cartoon face licking an LED bulb. I'm sorry. No, because I've gone in some of those lighting groups and she's great. But there was a study that came out that she did that basically was talking about the UVB output that your Nathan, I guess, decided to say bye. Oh, there he is. So basically demonstrating the effectiveness or the let me pull up the actual study so that I don't again look like an idiot. But
Go past the summary page.
Yeah, past the summary page. So for any of you that like aren't big into reading scientific studies and then you come across one, you got to read more than the summary. Number one, because the summary is
bold.
yeah, because you have to make sure that what they are doing how they're measuring these things are actually scientifically sound, because anybody can go out there and write something that really sounds sexy, but it doesn't mean there's any legitimacy behind it.
Not all sexy as erotica.
Right.
It's
So
past my
let,
bedtime. I'm sorry.
I'm pulling up the Nathan, do you want to? We've been sharing your screen. Do you want to try and pull this up so that we can?
Turn off your erotica.
But
I'll just keep it hidden from you guys.
But
I'm a
anyways,
gentleman.
I will say that a lot of people have taken this study, and they've come back with thoughts on us doing a affiliate sponsorship with you guys and saying like, well, this study states that they're not effective, or that they don't produce enough UVB, or they're not doing A, or they're not doing B. Now, I'm more than sure that you two know fully what that study entails. So rather than me sounding like a moron, I'm going to let you guys kind of take over, talk a tiny little bit about what the study suggested, and then just I want to hear your guys' comments and feedback in regards to that, because I truly believe in y'all's product, and everyone who's bought in your lights that I've talked to tell me about the massive behavioral changes that they notice in their animals.
So you had
Just
to
direct
bring
me
right
where
onto
to
the
go.
summary, just so that I could have like a heart attack.
Right.
So this is actually a good study that was written about how, like, what she was testing for with lighting and, you know, things like that. We did tell her, and we do fully admit that this was our first generation bulb, and so there were some things that we have changed since then, because we actually talked to her during the study, and she would give us feedback, and we go, great, and then we would make those updates.
I love that.
So it wasn't like it was, oh, I did this and they don't know. Like, we
sent
gave her
we
the
sent her
bulbs.
the bulbs. We knew she did the study. Yeah.
But they are the old generation one, so they're not even dimmable. These are the non-dimming ones, to kind of give you guys an idea a little bit. The problem is that a lot of people are looking at the summary page, because the summary is easier than going through, I want to say it's like 11 pages or something.
21.
21. It's a very well written,
Which isn't
like,
even that long, but
it puts
anyways.
a lot in, right? It puts a lot into it, but in the day and age of just wanting to take snippets of things, a lot of people were just looking at the summary, and then unfortunately they were also looking at the bolded parts of the summary, and the bolded parts tended to be the things that were a call to action. This is, we need to study more on what the UV spectrum, you know, what the actual biosynthetic side of the UVB spectrum is. What do they actually need in here? What's not bolded is one of her biggest compliments, that this is as close to UV from the sun as you can get without the detriment. That was awesome. That wasn't bolded. But calls to further your studies were actually the parts that were bolded, and those are also the parts that people really focused on, unfortunately. So
Thank you,
now,
IO psychology.
yes. So now you can go on. I had to get that out, or it would kill me.
Now I can get into the specifics of what people are looking at with this study. So
Please.
The only thing in here that's negative, and that can be taken negatively, is that these bulbs are the LEDs are lacking the wavelength between 310 and 335 nanometers, which through one study that I know of, I've heard that there's more than one. There may be one other one, but we're trying to find it. It's thought that those wavelengths stop the overproduction or the oversynthesis of vitamin D3 and stop hypervitaminosis. That obviously would be bad if your animal can't stop making D3 and become sick from it. We haven't seen that in any of the animals, and I think there's a couple reasons for it. One, I'm not sure. I think that there definitely needs to be more studies done on what that actually looks like, what having that wavelength or not having that wavelength does or doesn't do in long term to animals. Because the study that was done, just unfortunately, and even through some of the professional lighting people that I know and people we've discussed don't really agree with that study as really showing what they thought it did. The way it was done really wasn't done very, I want to say it wasn't done well. It wasn't a bad study. It just wasn't done the way it really should have been. There's a lot of room for improvement, and taking out a lot of variables that they weren't considering. And that's really what needs to happen, is what within those wavelengths, what really happens. So the problem with LED and why it doesn't have those wavelengths is because there isn't anything that needs those wavelengths. So we were talking earlier about how with Reptile products, if you look at a lot of the products that we have, it's all products that exist somewhere else that we've kind of MacGyvered or tweaked or converted to work for Reptiles.
Or just put in a new box.
Right. Just because, unfortunately, while we see the reptile hobby as being this giant industry, it's probably smaller than just the industry of cordless drills. Like, there's a lot of things bigger than the reptile industry. So unfortunately, the reptile industry by itself, the entire hobby, doesn't have the weight and buying power to be able to launch huge new innovations. We have to find things that are out there and adapt them. There isn't an LED out there that covers that spectrum really well, because there's no specific need outside of reptile for it. We are working with our manufacturer on some potential custom diodes to fill that spectrum in. And then once we have those, we'll be utilizing, we'll hopefully be getting those to some friends to do some research and actually do a paper on the difference between LED bulbs that do and do not have that wavelength and what it does to a diverse group of animals over time. Yeah. So more study needs to be done on that, or on that specific piece. But that is the only thing lacking in the LEDs that is in fluorescent and other types, and it's basically a hypothesized thing that could be a problem. The reason I believe that we're not seeing the detriment that people expected to see from that, so more study needs to be done, and we're hoping to be able to move forward on some of that stuff and actually be a part of figuring out what pieces of those wavelengths make sense, what's needed, what's not, and then being able to take that and insert that knowledge into those bulbs and keep moving it forward. So that's a negative side. Now, like I was saying, I believe the reason we're not seeing a massive detriment from the lack of that wavelength, even if that wavelength is important for stopping overproduction of D3, I think the reason that we're not seeing hypervitaminosis in any of our animals, as well as any of our customers' animals throughout the last year and a half, almost 2 years of having the bulbs, is that they're spotlights. So the animals can move away from them. So they're not stuck under that, getting blasted with UV that's creating D3 without the ability to get away from it, causing them to oversynthesize. Like a tube over an entire enclosure, if that was the case, that could be really detrimental. But I think the reason we're not seeing that is because the animals are able to regulate their UV. But the other point that I want to make that doesn't really get brought up, and it is brought up in that paper, is that take out the lacking of UVB, this bulb has something that no other bulb has, and that's a wide distribution of UVA. All fluorescents, mercury vapors, metal halides, they provide UVA, but they're small slivers of intense energy that breaks through the phosphors. They're not a wide band of UVA that allows the animals to see it, that changes their behaviors. That's why you can turn our bulb on with your other UV lights on, and some animals, like bearded dragons, will actually look straight at it and walk right at it, even with all the other lights on, because that creates a wavelength of light that they can instantly see. While this does have a potential lack in wavelength, we haven't seen the detriment that is, I'm being told, we should be seeing, and is hypothesized based on that. I think that we can easily explain why we're not seeing that, even if it is the case that wavelength helps to regulate D3. But realistically, I think the other piece we have to look at, and no one's talking about, everybody's just talking about whether that little piece of wavelength actually makes a difference or not. And it's all factual based on one study that no one's read. Most people are just saying, "Oh, I heard it's bad," and it's bad. But we really need more studies on that. And the other thing we need to look at is the massive benefit that the wide distribution of UVA brings to those animals and how it changes their health, behaviors, appetites, eating behaviors, day-night cycle. It completely changes that animal's life. So, I don't know. To me, if I'm weighing the two, that risk is
Minimal?
is minimal compared to what we gain on the other side.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that, it might not be the best production of UVB that's out there right now. And fair enough, you guys are an LED bulb versus, other bulbs out there. But the caveat to that is you're providing probably one of the best UVA outputs that is on the market. And if you just remove UVA from the equation to just only get best quality UVB, I guess you could say, it's not going to have as good as an effect of having a good combination of both.
So
Exactly.
here's the other part of it. So assuming that phosphors, metal halides, and
Fluorescent.
there you go, do have this wavelength. See, this is why it's just filling
That's
the
great.
blank. Has this wavelength. That doesn't mean that as the bulb degrades, that's not one of the first to go. So it might be there, but we don't know how long it lasts in those other bulbs. So it could be something that just goes, we're done and it's gone. Or they might only have part of that little area. So they might only have 1 to 2 nanometers of it rather than the entire thing. So it's putting a lot of stock into assumptions. That paper raised a lot of great questions that I
Need to
would
be studied further.
Yeah, that I would love to see, because there's 8 that you can think of off the top of your head. But unfortunately, the interest in that would allow somebody to maybe write a thesis or, get funding, there's not as much interest in it as opposed to, what calcium supplement can you give?
If you're if you're watching this and you know someone in a university that works in the biology department, or you have a kid's uncle's nephew's son's best friend who's at school and doing
Why would they
research
know
on
him?
something, let us know. We're looking for anyone who's
I know someone.
interested in doing actual publishable research. And even if it's a white paper, granted, I would love universities, but even what Lucas is doing, that he's got a knowledgeable background in the subject. He has an understanding of the animals. He knows we've in depth discussed what kind of behavioral changes he should be seeing, what kind of things to look for, so many different things, and that's
If a 14-year-old can do a paper and a presentation at the Gecko Symposium, we believe in y'all.
Yeah, there
You
we
can
go.
also do white papers. If you have a question, let us know. We'll help you set something up. We can give you better parameters. Just don't be afraid. Again, a 14-year-old. He was 14? 15?
He was 16 at the time.
That's pretty awesome.
If you get a chance, the 2019 Gecko Symposium,
When did we get...
it was October Tinley. Grayson Offerman did a talk. I don't know if it's online or anywhere. You'll probably have to hit up Brian Kusko or somebody. I think they recorded it. But Grayson Offerman did a talk on the Leachianus geckos and the differences in growth patterns between ones that were raised under UV and ones that weren't. And it's substantially super cool what he found out.
Awesome.
It's really, really cool. So that, and that was something where I was when I was with Zilla. And I was at a show, and I heard over the loudspeakers at Arlington, I heard, young blah, 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 Grayson Offerman, 14, breeding lychee, is going to give a talk. And I heard, anytime I hear a kid's going to give a talk, I'm there. Every kid that's a nerd about reptiles is my new best friend.
That's why we love Lucas. Nope.
Not
Sorry, not you.
another Lucas.
I was like, oh, geez, you guys are... It's
So
rude.
there's a little kid that loves bugs and breeds mantises, and his name is Lucas.
I know. Wasn't he the one at Arlington that went with Adler to take pictures?
No, that was our son.
Oh, that was my nephew. No.
Oh,
that was
okay.
Peyton.
Now our son.
The son.
All right.
Yes.
So
We
I'm
just
not.
finished adopting
So
him.
so I'm not the little kid you guys love.
No, we still love you, but you're not a little kid.
And your childlike wonderment.
But,
I pumpkined an hour
no,
ago.
so anyway, so Grayson, I heard that I went in there and he watched him give his talk on lychees and how he bred them and kept them, and his dad's a very well-known herp vet and friend, so it was really cool to watch him, and we ended up talking. I went up afterwards, people asking him questions, this kid, and I went up to him and I was like, so I was just curious, do you ever put UV on your lychees? He's like, no, they don't need it, they're nocturnal, and I'm like, that's exactly what I wanted you to say. So, well, if you're interested, I'd love to send you some. And if you do it, I want you to do a study, just anecdotal. We'll grow some with UV, some without. and just anecdotally tell me what you see. Well, he doesn't. This kid's a science nerd, and his dad's a big science nerd and vet, and he doesn't do subtle little study. He turned his entire closet into like a facility and had multiple little greenhouses and all this stuff separating them and different, like he weighed and did head measurements and stuff.
His variable list was minimal, and then he explained it and felt bad that he had so many variables. We're like, it's like nothing.
It's like it was really, really well done and really, really well thought out. And at the end of it, he ended up figuring out was, and I think this is part of the UVB EVA and ability to see it and stuff, the animals that had access to UVB EVA were more likely, or they started growing right away especially with we breed leeches, and you always, with every baby, for like the first month and a half they barely grow. I mean, they eat all the time, they just don't grow, and then there's this huge spike, and then they start taking off, and you see that pretty consistently. With his study, he saw that too with the ones that didn't have access to UV lighting, but the ones that did, it completely cut off that stall, and it started the same growth curve, but it started right away.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty insane. And I love hearing, so like every time that I get to talk to you guys, I hear about these new differences in just talking about lighting in general, that people see on their animals. And that's what I think me and Nathan are most excited for, is to actually get to see them with our Retics and be able to observe them and see the changes and differences. Nathan, did your cat see like a lizard? It's frozen. Oh no, it's moving now.
No, she's just slow.
So, slight caveat: putting on high quality UVA onto your animals does not necessarily make them friendlier.
It wakes up their natural behavior, which might be to hate you.
No, and that's exactly
the problem in HOTS. Actually, we found out.
We actually had to alert a lot of the zoos that were starting to work with our bulbs. We had to let them know very carefully up front. Be aware, your animals' behaviors are going to change. Their alertness is going to change. Their feeding behaviors, their day-night cycle, how they utilize their enclosure, all of it, including how they react to you. So your animal that maybe the Mangshan that's been easy to hook and move, all of a sudden she's a lot more squirrely and alert, and she was. So like that's something that you have to kind of realize too.
That'll be interesting in the study with this already really defensive snake that I'm gonna be using, but there could be the caveat, and the inquisitiveness spikes up, defensiveness might drop down a little bit, feeding response might increase. So I'm really excited to see that. But Nathan, do you have anything else that you want to mention before we hop off?
No, I think just mentioning that my plan with the bulb is throwing it into my easiest female's enclosure. So, I mean, we'll be able to kind of monitor the difference between.
I'd be curious to see, because, for our spinulosis, one of them became friendly. It was like, ooh, yeah, let's go. Let's play with the dog. And the other two are just like, up yours.
One of them's a lot more inquisitive and inquisitive nature, and the other ones are a lot more
territorial.
Yeah, they're a lot more structured in what they're looking at. But you still see that behavioral change. You just see it in a more alertness and a behavioral change to be a little bit more ready to fly. A little bit more fight or flight versus this other one that was just like, well, I'm happy now and I want to see what that thing is on the other side of the glass.
Which is interesting. They actually hold their ground longer, so their flight radius is shorter. Or longer. No, shorter. Yeah, it's shorter because you can get super close. Even that crocodile tegus we were talking to you about, because they have it, I'm suspicious that they can see, they actually make their own borders with their pheromones and stuff, and so I'm suspicious that they know like where that border is, and they know that glass is now a barrier. Not because they don't see glass very well, but I'm really suspicious that they have some pheromones smeared on that to kind of.
At some point, they realize, like
Nathan, right? At some point, they realize I can
past this part.
Really, the other ones haven't figured it out yet.
Nathan, you mentioning that with your nicest female, and then you guys started talking about that aspect. I have a wild caught Calotoa retic that I'm wondering what the heck might happen. That's a whole different.
We take no responsibility.
No, that's okay. I've worked. It's taken me a long time to get her to be the sweetheart that she is. So Yeah, that'll definitely be interesting. But guys, I want to thank you so much for both of you coming on, hanging out with us. I know it's past your bedtime. I know it's past my bedtime. And
And
so
yours.
so real quick, if you could just leave a little comment. So, well, real quick before I even do that, because I want to end with you guys on that. Let me just remind you guys, we have our Patreon. We'll drop the link down below. And, of course, like, subscribe, comment on these videos. Please give us feedback. If you've used a Vivtech product, let us know down below what you guys think so far. And if you're not and you're using something else and you have questions for Erica and Ryan, where can they find you?
You can find us everywhere on the internet. Vivtechproducts.com is our website. Not my. I don't have an OnlyFans. Maybe I should.
I'm gonna need that link.
And then you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. You can message us there. You can find me and Erica on all those platforms as well. TikTok. So yeah, pretty much anywhere. Pretty much everything short of smoke signals we'll reply to.
I am getting better at texting people back. Sorry, Josh.
Well, I really do appreciate you guys. And lastly, as Nathan put on his USARK hoodie, do not forget to just continue to be an active supporter of USARK. Go to the shows, go to the auctions. They're a bunch of fun. Donate money that on something that you don't even need, but just for the cause. You can literally walk out of that building and be like, here, want a ball python? They'll be like, sure. But
some of our products,
5% of the net profit,
yeah,
including even off the ones that you guys get a discount on, we're still donating the same amount to USARK as if you didn't get a discount.
Yep.
There you go. I'd love to hear that. And then I want you to leave our viewers and listeners with like a little motivational quote to kind of end in regards to your lighting and what you guys would like to see the industry move forward.
When it comes to reptile husbandry, my goal is always to try and get as close to nature as I possibly can, so that I can observe the animals I love in the habitat that I wish I could see them in. And the only way to provide them with true sunlight and UVA that's going to give them the abilities to utilize their environments like that is by using Vivtech bulbs. And it's not like everybody buy Vivtech. Like, yeah, obviously I want that, but at the same time, really for me, it's just been incredible to watch the changes in the animals. The behaviors of the species that we're keeping has changed significantly in the past couple of years of using these bulbs, and it's allowed us to just see some incredible things, like our croc tegus having courtship behaviors, which there's 8 of them in the United States. To catch 2 of them courting each other is going to be incredibly difficult, and to have been able to have caught that's incredible. So like, that's stuff that comes with this light and the things that you're able to do and see with it, and it changes. It's going to change how we keep reptiles. And I think I said this to you, Lucas, when we were in Arlington. It kind of hit me, and I think I said this. This is the first reptile product I can think of that actively improves the mental and emotional health of your pets.
That was the quote.
That's the quote.
There you go.
But I'd love the statement. Guys, thanks again so much for coming on, joining us tonight, and for you listeners, again, thanks for the support, and we'll catch you guys on another episode next Friday.